Hi, welcome to another episode of Tom Kennedy Science. And we're going to explore the universe. And today we're going to explore carbohydrates. Now, this is another lecture in my Bio for Health Sciences for college freshmen wanting to go into like nutrition, sports ed, or into nursing. So it's a bit windy out here in New Mexico today. So you might hear some of the wind blowing around my studio here. So carbohydrates. So today we're just going to talk about what is a carbohydrate and the various roles of carbohydrates and then the different types of carbohydrates. And here I have it very simply as simple carbs and complex carbs. There's a little bit more to that, but we'll break it down and get into it. So first of all, what exactly is a carbohydrate? Well, first of all, if you're a nutritionist, it's one of the four macronutrients. And the generalized formula for it is CH2O to the N. All right, so what does that mean? Okay, first of all, it's made of carbon. This is an organic molecule, so it's going to have carbon in it. Also a bunch of hydrogen and oxygen, hence CH2O. Now, glucose is a type of carbohydrate. It's one that most of us are familiar with. And it has what is called a chemical formula, C6H12O6. So if our CH2O in our N equals 6, that means that our glucose is going to have 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. Okay, now these molecules are held together, these elements are held together by covalent bonds. So when you see a molecule like this, that's glucose, those lines represent covalent bonds. We're sharing valence electrons between our various elements. And at the little nodes right there, you can't see them. They're not drawn in there, but that is our carbon. And if you count them up, there are 5 of those little nodes, and then you've got the carbon at the top, and that's our 6 carbon atoms. Okay, so glucose is also hydrophilic. Hydro means water, phile means love of, so this likes to dissolve in water. So most carbohydrates are water soluble, and the reason why is because they can form a hydrogen bond with water, okay? So there's our hydrogen bond. And remember, this is a weak force, right? So water is a polar molecule. It's got a partially negatively charged in. And anytime you see oxygen covalently bonded to hydrogen, the hydrogen is going to be partially positively charged. And those opposite charges are going to attract to each other. And as a result, carbohydrates, especially glucose, can easily be dissolved in water. Okay, so what are the roles of carbohydrates? You know, I bet you know the first one already. That is energy. They are a very important source of energy, both in the short term and in the medium term right here. So this, potato, right? I jammed a plug in it to show that it's got energy. That energy is stored in the bonds of the carbon and the carbon and the carbon to the hydrogen. And we need that energy, especially for like our brains and our muscles, and also maintaining homeostasis. I mean, just every moment of every day, your brain is using 20% of your energy budget. Okay. Another thing that carbohydrates are very important for, and they don't get a lot of recognition for this, is they form precursor molecules. So in our cell metabolism, we have both catabolic and anabolic pathways. Catabolic is breaking things down. So as we break down carbohydrates into smaller molecules through glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, we end up forming things like the pyruvate and the acetyl carbons, or the 2 carbon acetyl groups. Those are precursors for many anabolic reactions. So we can use those precursor molecules to make amino acids, to make other carbohydrates, and to make lipids along with other molecules that our body needs. So those precursors are very important for us. Okay, carbohydrates also important for things happening down at the cellular level, like cell communication, cell recognition, sticking cells together. So things like your A, B, and O blood group, all right, an A or a B blood type is called a glycoprotein. So it's got some sugars attached to it. And you can see there's some different types of fructose and galactose attached to these proteins. And our cells, our immune system can recognize our A, B, or O blood types. Those are also known as antigens because they produce, if you get the wrong antigen, you produce an antibody for it. And some of those are those short-chained carbohydrates. Okay, so cell recognition, cell signaling. And of course, support as well. All of these trees along the Wakulla River here all the cells are surrounded by a cell wall, and they can actually add some proteins into that cell wall to make it very tough. So plants definitely rely on carbohydrates for structural support. And then lastly, we need carbohydrates for our gut health. Some carbohydrates we cannot digest. That's our fiber in our foods. And that helps things keep moving through. It can lower cholesterol and help maintain a healthy, varied gut microbiome. So as you can see, carbohydrates have a lot of different roles. They're not just used for a quick source or medium-term source of energy. All right, so let's break this down here. What are the different types of carbohydrates? Okay, so there's different ways of classifying and thinking about carbohydrates. If you go to the Wikipedia or you go to a chemistry class like biochem or an organic chemistry class, you're going to hear the term saccharide. And saccharide just means sugar. Okay, so you can have the smallest, most simplest type. You have monosaccharides. Glucose, fructose, galactose, ribose are examples of monosaccharides. Those are also monomers. We'll come back to that. Disaccharides, di just means two, right? So disaccharide, you're familiar with sucrose, that's table sugar, and lactose, which is produced in milk. And then you have the oligosaccharides. Those are anywhere between about 3 and 9 glucose, fructose, whatever galactose molecules stuck together. About 9, up to about 9 of those, simple sugars stuck together being an oligosaccharide. Very important for cell communication, though. And then, of course, the much larger, anything over about 10 of these monomers, building blocks, would be a polysaccharide. And there we have things like the various types of starch, cellulose, and glycogen. However, a lot of us are very interested in nutrition. So if you think about it from a nutritionist point of view, you have simple carbs. So those are the monosaccharides and disaccharides. And then you have the complex carbohydrates, which are your different types of starches, glycogens, and fibers are also a complex carbohydrate. They're a polymer as well, but that is cellulose, but our bodies can't digest that. So these simple carbohydrates, most organisms make glucose. And we also have glycolysis, the metabolic pathway to break it down as well. And plants make them in large quantities. So they're a precursor for all the different polymers. And these simple sugars, they taste sweet and they're loaded up in, all of our fruits and vegetables, or fruits especially. And because they're water soluble and easily absorbed into the bloodstream, they are a quick source of energy. Okay, so these simple carbohydrates, monosaccharides, monomers, here's 2 examples, glucose and fructose. Now, these 2 molecules are also called isomers. And an isomer means you've got the same chemical formula, C6H12O6, but you'll notice that they have different structural formulas. Okay, so here they are, and you can see that glucose forms a 6-membered ring and fructose forms a 5-membered ring. You also have disaccharides. Sucrose, which is table sugar, is made up of glucose stuck together to fructose, and then lactose, which is glucose and galactose produced by milk sugar. Okay, now here's our environmental connection. You eat some fruit, right? Like strawberry or something. But basically, when plants are making carbohydrates, they're storing that energy in the sunlight. So when you get energy, that energy ultimately came from the sun and was stored by plants doing photosynthesis, which is kind of cool. So the energy in us came from the sun, nuclear fusion. Here's our health connection. Simple carbohydrates and high fructose corn syrup. Our soft drinks are loaded with these things. High fructose corn syrup is about 55% glucose and 45% fructose. Now remember, this is not sucrose because the glucose and fructose are not attached to each other with covalent bonds. Okay, they're just bad, okay? There's Mr. Mackey. They're bad, okay? High fructose corn syrup is not that good. It's at least a high triglycerides, that's high blood fat levels. It can speed up aging, believe it or not, make your cells age faster. It can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it can even increase incidences of gout. And the reason why is because glucose and fructose are isomers. So they're going to be treated differently in the body. Glucose is going to release, cause an insulin to be released, and it's going to be taken up into your muscles and into your fat cells. And if you're active, you're going to quickly, burn that glucose off. However, fructose is taken to the liver where it's converted either to the glycogen or fat. And if you're constantly drinking lots of fructose, high fructose corn syrup, you start building these fat, you increase your triglycerides in your body, and you can get fatty liver disease from that as you build up fat in your liver. And this is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You can also have the same problem by drinking too much alcohol as well. All right, and very quickly, another health connection is many people are lactose intolerant. Lactose is a disaccharide formed by glucose attached to galactose. It's in the milk of all mammals. So we produce an enzyme early in childhood to break down lactose into galactose and glucose. As we go into adolescence, that gene is typically turned off. So because in the whole history of 200 million years of mammals, we never drank milk as an adult until humans came along and domesticated cows. And there was a mutation about 6,000 or so years ago that kept that gene on. So if you can drink milk, you're still producing lactase, the enzyme to break it down. If you're lactose intolerant, your gene is normal and you turn off that ability to make it. And so the lactose goes down into your colon because you can't break it down. And then it's fermented there by the bacteria. And when it gets fermented, bad things happen. Okay, now polysaccharides. These are complex carbohydrates. These are polymers, and the monomer, the building block of our polysaccharides, of course, is glucose. So there's our potato. Potatoes store lots of starch that is made by plants. And there's also fibers and cellulose. So let's just take a step back and look at glycogen. Glycogen is a complex carbohydrate. It is a polymer made up of glucose. Glycogen is made by animals. It's stored in our liver and in our muscles. This glycogen is highly branched, and it can have up to 30,000 glucose units, and we can easily break this down. And multi-branched polysaccharide. And then the next one is starch. Starch is made by plants, of course, and we can break starch down into glucose molecules. Now, this is a medium-term source of energy because there's an extra step involved with the digestion and then breaking off those individual glucose molecules. Then you send it off into glycolysis to be broken down. So because of the extra steps in breaking it down and absorbing it, it's a medium-term source of energy, whereas sugars are quick-term and fats would be long-term source of energy. Then, of course, there's fiber, which is made up of cellulose, which is also a polymer of glucose, but we can't digest it. And it's made by plants. It's the cell wall of plants, but believe it or not, fiber cannot be digested by animals. Now, lots of animals consume lots of plant material, but they have bacteria and other things inside their gut that can help them break it down. Even though we can't digest it and extract energy from it, it's incredibly important for our gut health. It keeps things moving through. It can lower cholesterol levels. It can aid in digestion, and it really helps maintain a very gut microbiome. All right, now, very important theme in biology. Form and function. Shape matters. We got starch, glycogen, and cellulose. Glycogen and starch can be broken down, but cellulose cannot. But they're all made up of glucose. What's the difference? Okay, alpha versus beta glucose. Here it is. If you look over here on your right, you will see that hydroxyl group, that OH, is the down position, and on the other one, it's in the up position. And that is the difference between an alpha glucose and a beta glucose. And when they polymerize, which means you put them together, they form a slightly different conformation. And we have enzymes that can break down polymers of alpha glucose, which forms starch and glycogen, but we can't break down polymers of beta glucose that forms cellulose. That's wild, isn't it? That one little position right there is the difference between a potato that you can eat and a 2x4 that you cannot digest. All right. Well, I hope you learned something. Until next time, stay curious.